in Hoboken tonight. So thank you so much. I'm going to disappear and leave the conversation to Jonathan and Joyce.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I wish I were in Little City Books in Hoboken. It's a wonderful, wonderful bookstore. I have been there several times, and I think Jonathan maybe has always been there with me. I have actually not interviewed anybody, so this is like my first event. So Jonathan, I'm sorry that you're sort of an experimental subject.
Oh, I am.
Well, welcome to Jonathan, and congratulations on your big new book. It's literally big, and just such a wonderful adventure. I believe I read 3 versions of it. Maybe there's a 4th version coming. I sort of wish that there were little drawings in here. I was sort of thinking that maybe you might have them, but as it turns out, Jonathan has, in fact, done drawings and paintings that would do these accompany the book if somebody wants to purchase them? How does that work?
If people buy the book, there's a link, and I've put it up, and it's on my website. The publisher will, if you buy a book, they'll send you this set of postcards of my drawings, and then you're automatically eligible to win one of the originals. They're drawings I made during the time I was writing the novel. That's Leonardo and Mona Lisa, Lisa Giardini. And I just did these drawings to feel closer to my subject matter. So
you are a most unusual writer in that you're equally talented and you've achieved an equal amount as an artist. I actually can't think of anybody who's sort of ambidextrous to that degree.
Well, you know, my life, it changed very dramatically because I went to art school. Oh, you know, I just have to say something. After I went to graduate art school, and when I was finished, I moved to Hoboken. I found this loft in Hoboken. It was very cheap. It was very big. It was next to Pablo's towing station in the far back part of Hoboken, and I loved living there. It was sort of before it was gentrified, though, and cool. But anyhow, I went to art school, and I was I guess a serious artist for a long time. And then there was a fire, which you know about, Joyce. It was a kind of 10-year retrospective of my work, and they gathered work from collectors and museums, and it went to one show, plus my 6 newest paintings, which were packed wet. They were crated wet. And the show opened on a Friday, and the building burned down the next day, on Saturday.
It's just such an extraordinary event. Shall we assume that there's an alternative life of yours where there was no fire and you continued as an artist?
You know, that's an interesting thing, because I think I probably would never have changed my life, because my life as an artist was going pretty well, you know, and I had no reason to change it. Why we don't change our lives if things are going well, right? But you know, it knocked me out of my life in this crazy way. And I was invited to the American Academy in Rome, which was just a coincidental. And so after the fire, my wife and my daughter, Dory, who was 8 years old at the time, we went and lived in Rome, which was, it's a great place to be depressed, I'll tell you that. It's so beautiful, and you can look at art, and but while I was there, I couldn't paint. I just couldn't paint. I was doing drawings from, I would go to churches and make copies of famous paintings, but I started my first novel, which became The Death Artist. And it was a success, which was a huge surprise. And so I kept going. And so my life has been sort of bifurcated and, you know, different. But I will say one thing, that because my work, That Fire, and then I was making copies when I was in Rome, I ended up having this odd art life after, where I make replications of paintings for people, kind of like I'm a legal art forger, you know, which I think brought me very close to this particular novel. So
well, it's a kind of turning point in your life when that fire took place. It was cataclysmic. So then after that, for a while, you didn't really feel that you wanted to paint. You probably had a real trauma, but then you were led to write a novel. So that was a big step. So was there any transition? Because now I don't think I have that novel right here, but other novels in these early series have a lot of drawings.
Mhm.
So you're really combining the two.
You know, I would say this. I had been writing for most of my life, but it was all nonfiction. I wrote for Art News. I went to, to look at the cave paintings. I got into Lascaux. I wrote, was on the scaffolding in Arezzo to write about the restoration of the legend of the True Cross. So I was always writing. I never had written a novel. And it was quite an undertaking. I thought The Death Artist, by the way, Joyce, was a kind of funny book, like a sort of satirical book about a serial killer in the art world. And then what happened was People magazine chose it as, I think it was the page turner of the week, but they said it was the scariest book of the year. And I was like, really? I think it's funny, but maybe it's good that people didn't think it was funny, So,
People thought it was funny. The drawings are very macabre.
oh, that's a different book. I didn't do drawings in The Death Artist. The drawings are an Anatomy of Fear, which is about a police sketch artist.
Right. And these are really very, very creepy drawings. Yeah. But you've ascribed to a psychotic person.
Mm.
It's just convenient,
Yeah. I mean,
They're really amazing.
well, that book, I wanted to create a character that's Nate Rodriguez, a police sketch artist, a forensic artist. And I wanted to create a character who made drawings so I could make drawings in a book. And I loved making that book. I really did. I met sketch artists and I became friends with a police sketch artist. I was going to say, though, yeah, that's the paper cover. I hate that cover. They have a beautiful hardcover, but in any case, doesn't matter.
I really recommend this. It's excellent. It's also, you're trying on your new life. And it's like these drawings are coming from the unconscious.
Yeah.
You often have alter ego characters in your novels. I mean, I noticed this in The Last Mona Lisa too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to, and I think you might agree and understand this. I love writing the psychotics. I love writing those people and seeing what makes them tick. And somebody asked me the other day, like, well, who's your favorite character? But it's whoever I'm writing at that moment. I'm inside their head. I love them. I mean, I love my bad guys, but because why wouldn't you? You have to know them and understand why they are who they are to write them.
Yes, and then this other novel was the Kate McKinnon.
Yeah, that's my second novel, and it's a very, very scary book.
Another person who's a psychotic, who's an artist, but I don't think you don't have his art in here.
You're not talking about me, right? As a psychotic artist.
No, the serial killer, the madman.
Well, you wrote that, The Amazing Zombie, which is a book that terrified me, just was so scary. It really is. It's one of the scariest books I ever read, being in the mind of that killer. And there are things I still remember about it. And I read it a long time ago, so.
One of the scary things about Zombie is that everything in it actually happened.
Yeah, right.
It either Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or someone else. But I did little drawings in there, but my drawings are sort of childlike. They're not like your drawings, which it almost seems as if this actually could be the madman who's doing these drawings.
Well, yeah, I had to get into the head of two different people to do those drawings, the forensic artist and the killer. And I had to make them, in my mind, they had to feel different. They were not the same person. I didn't. I didn't.
Plus form.
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
It's funny because for me, when I go and draw, I always feel better. I feel healthier. I feel happier. It takes me into a different world. So to be trying to make drawings that are made by a crazy person, a psychotic, is sort of the antithesis of what I feel when I'm making drawings, you know. And I didn't make drawings for the last Mona Lisa for many reasons, but this main reason was that I wanted to take the reader into this world, you know, of the present and the past, the Renaissance, and also my character now, today, walking through the streets of Florence, going into these art places, the scariness of some of those side streets. And I figured there was enough art in the book and in that city that I didn't want to interrupt it with my drawings. I really just didn't want to. So it just was a different activity, you know.
Well, we should talk mostly about this book, obviously. I think the most exciting, or one of the most exciting aspects of this novel, is that it is in a way a historical novel, and that it dramatizes an event that most people don't know anything about. I mean, I was fascinated. And I think that your personal research, like you're in Florence, you're walking in Paris, just give the novel such a vivid life.
Well,
want to talk about your personal research?
Well, thank you. Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, it is taken from a true crime, which is the 1911 theft of the Mona Lisa from the Louvre Museum, which is an amazing story. I mean, there's many different variations and different theories, but I went with the most accepted one, and it was a jumping off point for me in the book, that Vincent Vincenzo Perugia, who was a disgruntled Louvre employee, he'd been fired. He was a carpenter, and he had made the box and the frame for the Mona Lisa. And he hid in a broom closet overnight, came out in the morning of a day the museum was closed. He unbolted the painting from the wall, put it under his shirt, and walked out of the museum. And there's so many extraordinary things about that, Joyce, because one, the painting wasn't missed for 2 days. Nobody noticed it was missing. There was a man came in to do work from drawings, and he said, "Where's the Mona Lisa? Where's the Leonardo?" And suddenly everyone was, "Where's the painting?" People thought it was out being cleaned or something weird. And then suddenly then there were 60 gendarmes in the museum and all over Paris. And yeah, so it's an extraordinary crime, and it was missing for 2 years. You know, I mean, Perugia had it. But I wanted to invent, you know, I just took this little bit and I wanted to invent a story, a backstory, and a present day story that could play off each other, you know, about, I don't know, I think it's the first time in my books I've been such a romantic too. I don't know if you felt that, but I feel like it's a very romantic story. So
There's this kind of beautiful balance between Luke's growing love for a woman who's essentially a kind of mysterious person, not unlike the Mona Lisa. I mean, she's sort of elusive, and even I don't think the reader is altogether sure what exactly she is, but Luke seems to fall in love with her. And then parallel with that is this wonderful relationship with John Washington Smith. And it was a really tender kind of buddy relationship. People haven't talked too much about that, but you had fun with that.
I did. You know, you know, it's so interesting, as you know, when you invent characters and they suddenly take on this life of their own. And, you know, I invented Luke Peroni as the great grandson of the thief, he's a totally fictional character. And John Washington Smith, who's the Interpol agent, who's also looking for this diary, is a completely fictitious character. But the relationship between Luke and Smith is one that took me a while to understand, because they're, of course, antagonists, and they have to, well, I don't want to spoil the book, but they do have to come together at a certain point to be able to work. And of course, Alex, who's a major character in the book, the woman whom he meets in the Laurentian Library, which I think is a kind of great romance. You know, I don't know. I kind of felt like there's the romance in the present between Luke and Alex, and then there's the romance in the past with Vincent Perugia and Simone, his wife. And I kept feeling like they were the same people over time. You know, I was reminded of The French Lieutenant's Woman, which is a book I love. And when they made the movie, they made the people in the past be the actors in the present, which was a wonderful kind of idea. And I think of that in my book. There was another book that influenced how I wrote this, I think, which is Possession by A.S. Byatt, which is a book I read many years ago, and then I reread it. You know, this fictional poet who these people are searching for, they find these poems. And so, you know, this diary is found, and the diary is completely fiction, you know, and I use it to continue the story intermittently throughout the book. But it was so much fun to write the diary entries, you know.
Well, the diary seems to be really a different voice. It's almost like prose poetry. Simone is a more romantic figure, I think, than Alexandra.
Yeah, yeah.
More, well, she's fated and doomed, whereas Alexandra is more morally ambiguous.
That's interesting. You know, I always, when you say fated and doomed, I mean, I always think of like how in noir, the femme fatale, who is so wonderful and beautiful and sexy, she's always doomed. It's such a terrible role for, do you know what I mean? For a female character. I didn't, you know, I didn't think Simone is I don't want to ruin it again, but she's a tragic figure, but she's also this incredible object of love. And so I wanted the reader to see her through Vincent's eyes, and you know, and the whole their great love, and I don't, you know, I mean, I could go on and on about that, but I won't because it's in the book.
You arranged for the baby to get the last sort of the last vision in the novel is her child.
Yeah, you know, that's where I become very romantic. Hopefully not too corny.
Maybe there's a baby in your future.
No. Yeah, I'm yeah, I don't want to go there. But so yeah.
Let's get back to John Washington Smith, because most reviewers and Zoom conversations haven't said anything about him.
No.
Whereas I thought the relationship between him and Luke was excellent. And if there's a movie or a Netflix series, they will be really good. He's a Black man of 47 who feels he's been left behind. He works at Interpol. Most of us have no idea what Interpol is. So do you want to explain what Interpol is?
Well, you know, Interpol, I didn't know what Interpol did either. I had to do a lot of research, and I actually got to talk to a couple of people who have worked for Interpol. But Interpol is not really, their cases, they dole them out to local international police forces. They don't actually do the work. So John Washington Smith has actually gone rogue. You know, he's working at Interpol and he's obsessed with the Mona Lisa and this idea of this journal. And so he bolts out of his job in the same way that Luke bolts out of his life. And so they're on a kind of collision course. But I did think, I'm really glad you like their relationship, because it took me a while to figure it out and to write it and to understand it and to have these two men sort of connect in certain ways. Also, you know, so Smith is a man of about 47 and who feels like his career is sort of dead and he needs to do something. And Luke is a much younger man in his early 30s, and he is also stalled. You know, he wants to be an artist and he teaches, but his heart's not in it. And he just suddenly, but he's obsessed with his great grandfather and he just takes a chance. And I didn't write the book in that way, like, oh my God, my character has to have this arc of self-discovery. It wasn't that, but I kind of watched him grow myself through the book, you know, what he discovers about his great grandfather. And maybe in a certain way, I was very, very close to my grandfather, my mother's father, who was the most important man in my young life. And so I feel something very special for grandparents and great grandparents. And Luke finding this was like somewhat finding his family identity, you know, because it is a story of family secrets and obsession and all of that.
Well, it's a really beautiful touch that you have later on in the novel. When Luke goes to this apartment, he finds his great-great-grandfather's painting on the wall.
Yeah, I love that moment. You know, he
Really an inspired idea.
I don't remember how I came to it at all. I just, I remember loving writing that section when he comes to Paris and he climbs this staircase. He's found the apartment where his great grandfather and Simone have lived, and it still exists. And then Simone had painted vines on the wall, and they're no longer there, but there's like a pentimento of this thing, and he touches it, and then the old woman who lives there takes this painting out that had been there from when she first moved in, you know, like 80 years ago. And it's his great grandfather's little painting, which she gives to him. So, but I think it was a way for me to connect the past and the future in a tangible way through an object, you know?
Well, the novel is a thriller.
Oh yeah. I hope so.
And so when Luke is going up the stairs to ultimately gets this painting, which I think he puts in his belt or something, I was thinking, oh my God, he's going to get shot. Something's because there are a lot of men with guns in this novel. You know, like people are knocked out and things are happening. We haven't been talking about that aspect of the novel, the genre.
Well, you know, I love thrillers. I just love them. And there's something in my kind of maybe depraved psyche that I love the idea of a book that's like speeding along and that, you know, and I don't know, it's something in me that is interested in suspense and dramatic moments and danger. It's funny that in that moment when he's climbing the staircase, which is such a tender moment, I've obviously set you up and all the readers up to be worried. And I didn't want them to be worried then, but of course, I think it's right after that. There's a horrible scene of murder and mayhem, you know? So,
Yeah, I did want to ask you about, you know, why you were, or, you know, if you're particularly attracted to the genre, because there are slight differences in genres. It's mystery, suspense fiction, psychological suspense, and then there's thriller, and then there's detective, and there's actually legal thrillers. I mean, a lot of subgenres.
Yeah.
And you are drawn to the thriller.
Well, you know, I don't love the idea of labeling different books. I mean, I don't, you know, people have been saying all nice things about The Last Mona Lisa, but kind of like, it's a caper, it's a thriller, it's a heist book, it's a suspense novel, it's a romance novel, it's a historical novel. And all of that's just fine with me. But I think the book is, you know, it's a novel. It has all those aspects. I will say, Joyce, that I grew up on the Hardy Boys, Edgar Allan Poe, you know, Agatha Christie. I loved adventure stories, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Three Musketeers, Robinson Crusoe. I love adventure, and I think it's funny because I guess when I was writing this book, I knew it was a thriller because I love writing thrillers, but I also thought of it as an adventure story. I really did think of it as, you know, this guy's adventure that he goes off and has, and all the people in it who have adventures as well.
All of your novels have things happen in them. I mean, there is a good deal of introspection, particularly in this novel, but still, it's along a grid or trajectory of a lot of things happening.
Sure. You know, I think, you know, I've read, I can't say I've read all of your books, but I've read a great many of them. And I think, you know, when I read particularly some of your bigger, larger novels, you know, like a book of American Martyrs or Blonde, I think of them in the way I like to think about, I guess, my biggest books, not to compare them to yours, but like musical, like orchestrations, so that there's moments that are very quiet and moments that are very beautiful and soft. And then there are crescendo moments when drama happens and things really explode and charge. And I don't, at a certain point in this book, because it's a complicated book that I didn't want to feel complicated, I wrote every scene on an index card, that old method, and I spread them out on the floor. And I looked to see, was what the scenes were, who the characters were at that moment. And it was kind of very illuminating to me to see, that, oh yes, because this is in the past, and maybe I'll move this scene here because it'll play exactly against that in the present.
You're moving in chronological in the present time. Both times you're moving in chronological order.
Yeah. The reader moves through the past, in chronological order, through the diary entries, and they move through the present with Luke searching from New York to Florence and then to Paris. So yeah, and everything does happen chronologically. Some of it hadn't. I changed things around, and I didn't, what I said before about difficulty, I didn't want the book. The book has many points of view, the past, the present. I didn't want the reader stumbling. I liked the idea that it would feel, you just read it, you'd have this experience. I said to somebody else earlier that after I went to graduate school in painting, much to my parents' dismay, my mother said, well, I should get something out of that. Take me to art galleries. So I took my mother to art galleries in Soho, and we came into a gallery, I think it was Robert Ryman's white paintings. And my mother was just like, Johnny, I don't know. I mean, these just seem so easy. So I turned to her and I said, Mom, number one, this guy's devoted his whole life to this. So let's forget easy. But when you go to the ballet, do you want to see the ballerinas sweat? No, you want to enjoy that experience. You want them to take you away. So I didn't really want people to see my sweat. I didn't want them to see my hard work. Though, in fact, this book, I worked on it for a long time and it was complicated. But I mean, that. I know with Blonde, how you worked on Blonde for a couple of years at least. And the way that book is so hallucinatory and goes back and forth in time, actually.
Now, my novel is a postmodernist novel, and it's really, I think, not so accessible.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But let's just think about your novel. Because it's a thriller, it essentially, the difference between a thriller and, say, a mystery novel is that one moves around into the point perspective of different people. So you start off with a chapter, it's back in 1911, and we get a sense of what's going on there. Then you leap to the present time, and we're not so sure where we are, but we get into that little chapter. I think it's 3 pages long. But you're taking a big risk with that because that person doesn't come back again. But then with the 3rd chapter, you get to your main character. And then another character we haven't met yet, who's some sort of a hitman or some crazy, awful person. And so if this were a Netflix series, which I hope it will be, the camera is going to move to these different people and we will see them. We won't have any difficulty knowing that they're different and they're not the same person and so forth. And that's the difference between prose fiction and the visual medium. The thrillers are really, I think, really come sort of to vivid life when they're dramatized, because then you see the fluidity of the motion of a plot. In a novel, the novel is very well written, by which I mean there are very beautiful passages. So spending time in Luke's mind and his background, I was very interested in his boyhood background. I was thinking, is that something about Johnny I don't know?
No,
tattoo?
no, I'm not. No,
I thought he made it up.
I did. I had to say, I have to say two things, and I'm going to talk about that. But I wanted everybody who was watching to pay attention and note that Joyce Carol Oates just said my book was really beautifully written. So I want that etched somewhere on my tombstone. But now we can move on. So yes, Luke is a kind of amazing character to me. You know, he was a drinker. He's a recovering alcoholic. He was always in trouble. He was part of a gang.
He couldn't commit.
Hmm?
Couldn't commit to a woman.
No, he's had a billion girlfriends, and he can't commit. You know, the only thing I would say I share with Luke is that I was not a good student until I got to art school, and because art school sort of saved me because I could draw, but I couldn't concentrate on anything else. But I love Luke's background, and I don't think it ruins anything to say that it loops around so that Luke comes back to his boyhood home near the end and with his mother, which that was a scene that became very emotional and important to me.
That was very nice. And also Luke is not overly honest. I mean, his great grandfather's great grandson, because he ripped something out of a,
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of liked it that you were presenting a main character who was not a platitudinous or conventional hero. That
No.
he could do some things that were morally questionable.
That's so interesting because I didn't plan it that way, but in fact, as I wrote him and I got to know him better, I realized, oh, of course he could do this. Look at what he's been, what he's done. Do you know, I think that when I review the book and I look at it, I think everybody in the book is lying in one way or another. Almost every character's hiding something, which is kind of fun.
Yes, and then the Mona Lisas that we're seeing are maybe not the original. So there's this world in which this beautiful, iconic image of the elusive female is so elusive that she's actually replicated by ingenious forgers.
Yeah.
It's not even clear. We don't even know right now whether in the Louvre, right this minute, there is the original Leonardo's Mona Lisa or a very brilliant apple.
Well, you know, there are some people who believe that a forgery was switched at the time of the theft. I don't know. I don't want the Louvre to take out a contract on me. You know, that's their largest attraction. And so who knows, you know, but it is part of the things that I used that were true in the book is Yves Chaudron, the forger, was a real person, and he was suspected of being part of that plan to steal the painting and to make forgeries, which they could sell as the original. And we know that there were forgeries made of the Mona Lisa. Some of them surfaced. Some were even in museums. Others have disappeared. And you know, I mean, the Mona Lisa itself became much more famous and infamous after the theft. It was.
Well, let me ask you one thing, and I really don't know the answer to this.
Yeah.
Through some error, the Mona Lisa's eyebrows disappeared.
Yeah.
Now, when was the forgery? When would the forgery have been made?
Well, that's in other words, would the forged paintings have had the eyebrows or not? The forgeries would have been made during the theft time, that the 2 years when the painting was missing. So from 1911 to 1913 or so. Now, the eyebrows were from an initial very bad cleaning of the painting. The Mona Lisa did have eyebrows, and there's some there's some X-ray images where you can see the actual Leonardo strokes for the eyebrows.
So when was that? When did that happen?
When was the clean? I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure. I mean, nowadays it's never cleaned. You know, it's too dangerous.
Wouldn't it be interesting if there was somewhere there was a Mona Lisa with the eyebrows?
Hey, listen, I think, you know, I think we should paint one. I'll paint one. You know, I mean, um,
I'd love to do a heist novel in collaboration with you. This has been these wonderful, the Isabel Gardner Museum.
my God. Wait, did you just say doing a heist novel in collaboration with me?
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, I just want everyone else to witness that. You know, so,
So much
Joyce,
fun.
yes. Oh, the
Is that-
Isabel Stewart Gardner. You know, everyone can watch this Netflix series that's on now, and it's a brutal crime. You know,
What is it?
it's on now. I'm trying to think of the exact name, but you can find it on Netflix. It's a
Oh, I didn't even know that.
yeah, it's a four-part documentary about the Gardner Museum theft, and it's fascinating.
What happened to those paintings?
Because they don't really know. There are many theories in the documentary that it was either the Irish mob or the Italian mob, and the paintings were being used for collateral. Here's an interesting fact, which is
Um,
they interviewed the head of the art squad, the ex-head of the art squad from Scotland Yard, and he says art theft is the international currency. So you steal a painting and you use it, you know, you give it to someone, you say, okay, lend me $10 million for my heroin trade. They give you, I'll give you this painting.
wow, that's fascinating.
It's like, because you can't sell a Rembrandt that's stolen from the Garden Museum. You can't sell the Mona Lisa. So what do
Character.
you know, well, I'm sorry.
Only to that character that you invented.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it's a special room with all these wonderful things.
I love that idea. And supposedly, you know, there are these people who have these vaults with paintings.
Yeah.
More often, the paintings are bartered around the world. But, you know, these commissioned thefts, as they're called, for famous paintings, there's nothing you can do with them. You either hide them away or you use them for some sort of currency. But it's
so fascinating.
yeah.
Are you going to write more along the lines of the art history?
Yes, I'm actually writing a second book, which I didn't expect, but it sort of bloomed in my mind while I was writing this one, and I made little notes. And
About Luke?
yeah, Luke is back, and John Washington Smith is back, and it's a totally different story, but it got a hold of me, you know. So I'm
Second season.
hmm?
That's the second season of the series.
Yeah, it's the second season of
And I also want to ask you why this title? It's actually a little bit of an odd title.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, that title was arrived at sort of toward the end of the book, and that was not the working title of the book. The title of the book was the original, which I loved, and nobody else loved it. None of the publishing people didn't like it at all. They said it doesn't mean anything, and I said, well, it'll come to mean something. But then I started playing with just the idea of a title with the Mona Lisa. And I thought the last Mona Lisa was enigmatic. And I like titles that don't explain things.
Well, it doesn't explain it. But I think when you read the novel, you're left a little more baffled about the title.
Ah,
Remember that song of many, many decades ago, Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have.
it's Nat King Cole. And in fact,
I didn't even think of it till just this minute, but that's an elusive female, like a mirage.
it was a huge hit. And it was a big early hit for Nat King Cole. You know, it's a beautiful song. It's funny because I played it the other day and it would not get out of my head.
Yeah, I never thought of it till just this minute. Well, tell the whole audience a little about the Mona Lisa itself. Why don't you describe the actual painting?
Well, the thing about the painting, I think that there's many things about it. You know, the first time people see the Mona Lisa, they all have the same thought, which is it's so small. And it is a small painting. And like anything that's very, very, very famous, you know, it takes you a while to see it again. But it's a painting that, oh, that's my little pink watercolor that I made of the Mona Lisa. And I somehow wanted her to look closer to the age of Lisa Giardini, who sat for the painting. But you know, Joyce, the painting was a commission. Giardini was a silk merchant. He was part of the burgeoning middle class. And Lisa was his third wife. His first two wives had died in childbirth. And he and Lisa was much younger. And he commissioned Leonardo when Leonardo needed money to do this painting. And then Leonardo got famous and he didn't need the money anymore. And he never gave him the painting. He kept it with him.
He fell in love with her.
I think
it's
he,
like Oates. Didn't Oates work for years on single paintings?
Yeah, many artists have done that. And I think, you know, I think for Leonardo, who only, by the way, made 15 oil paintings in his life. He did zillions of drawings and he was inventing things, and he's an amazing, brilliant artist and thinker, but he didn't make many paintings, and he kept that painting with him, and he painted it in his very special technique, which is thin layers of oil, very transparent, over and over on top of themselves. It's called sfumato, which translates into something like turn to smoke. And he kept painting on that painting, and it was with him when he died in France at the end of his life. So it was a painting he really cared about. And then, of course, it ended up in the French courts, and then Napoleon took it and hung it in his bedroom until it ultimately ended up in the Louvre. So it has, you know, what I think certain objects have is they contain history. The Mona Lisa is like the Renaissance. It's Leonardo. It's our idea of beauty and feminine beauty and mystery, and all of these things combined into this one little painting that make it an icon, you know? So
I think many people, certainly including myself, have no idea how a painting actually comes into existence. Like your mother thought the white paint was, you know, that's a typical remark. Well, I can put some white or some black paint on a canvas. It's not going to look like Franz Klein or Rothko. It's not going to look anything like it. You know, like there's so much subtlety in preparing the paint. Now, many people don't know, and I certainly didn't know, that colors, there are new colors, like 20th century, that didn't exist in the past.
Of course, yeah.
I've been in your studio and I've seen that you mix colors and you kind of create colors. I think most of us think that all the colors are sort of out there, like in a Platonic cosmology, but that's not true.
No. I mean, you know, I went to a very serious art school, Boston University, which has a small, very academic art school where you grind your own colors. I mean, my painting classes, we were only allowed to have 5 or 6 pigments, and we had to mix every color. And it's the greatest gift, because when I'm painting, I can just look at something and figure out what it would take to mix that color. But, you know, I wanted to say to you, when you're saying about what it takes to make a painting, it's kind of like facing a blank page, Joyce. When you start a novel, you know, you're going on this, you're filling these pages with words and sentences that build up and become something, you know. Yeah.
Also moving on different levels. Like if you have a very thin, rapid narrative that's just on the surface, there's nothing there. As you write the prose, you have to go down a little. So it's like preparing the canvas. It's not just a sheet of construction paper that you're putting some.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons. Yeah.
Subtlety.
I was going to say one of the reasons they can detect frauds is because of the fact that certain things were not invented at a certain time. You know, I make replications for people. I say to them, don't try and pass this off as the real thing, because it won't pass any scientific investigation, you know, because I'm using alkyd oils, which were invented, you know, recently. So, you know, the invention of oil paint itself was, you know, invented by the Dutch, and it changed the way people painted, because they could paint slowly. Things didn't dry right away.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, again, I don't think most people know about legal art forgery. There's a whole world of the nether world of art forgery.
Yeah.
They're perfectly legal.
Well, if you're making legal art forgery, you're not trying to sell them as the real thing. You know, that's the big difference. You know, I mean, when I make paintings, I'm making them for people. They're not going to put them up at auction, although there are fakes everywhere that end up at auction, as we know.
But couldn't one of your paintings be sold as a Jonathan Santlofer imitation, say, of Franz Klein?
Well, interestingly, replications and art about art has become very, very fashionable. So I'm not the only person doing this. I mean, people come to me for certain things, but I don't know, it put me into the head of the art forger in the novel when I was writing it so much. Like I understood him, what it's like to slip inside another artist's mind and hand. I really got that,
I thought that was so beautiful. Maybe you want to read that passage, or is it too long? It's so good. It's so
I'll read a little of it. I mean, this passage, it's a piece of the diary. And isn't it? Yeah, it's a piece of the diary, and it's Perugia has been duped by these guys or part of the plan. And he goes to see the copies that this forger has made. So I'll read very quickly. When I finally saw Chaudron's Mona Lisa forgeries, I had to admit they were brilliant. The man had a perverse genius for mimicry that was without equal. He had studied and replicated all of the formulas, the ratio of sun-thickened linseed oil to Venice turpentine that Leonardo would have used back in 1503. He had purchased the same kind of wood Leonardo had used. He'd cut each panel to size. He'd sanded and aged them with poppy seed oil, cooked up rabbit skin glue and coated the wood to protect it from rot, then a layer of pure lead white. Then he covered them with Damar varnish made from crystals he had purchased at auction from the workshop of a minor 16th century artist. It was the technique used by all the artists at the time. Now I go on, but I'll skip ahead to it's a short thing anyway, but Chaudron, the forger, proudly showed me the backs of the panels where he had duplicated every mark, every stamp, every smudge. And for the pièce de résistance, he had replicated the stamp of the Louvre Museum itself. But that was not all. He had set the finished paintings in front of whirring fans and laid them near fires. He drew wicks of candles across their surfaces to age them. He added extra coats of varnish he knew would intentionally crack. All of this had taken several months of his labor, but I had been waiting for 2 years. Now the forgeries were ready. Now I'm skipping a little. He went about selling the paintings one by one, and each collector believed he was buying the actual Mona Lisa. When Valfiero finished selling the forgeries, he returned the original to me. He told me it was my payment, worth millions, and I believed him.
Right. That's wonderful. I think that chapter is just brilliant. And there's so many exciting things in it. And I just have to ask you.
Yeah.
Did you make that up, the cooked up rabbit skin glue? Did you make that up?
Oh, no. That's a real thing. Rabbit skin glue is what artists used on their canvases to protect the surface.
But did he really do this?
Oh, yeah.
Did you do 6 Mona Lisas, or did you make that up?
No, that's true. Somebody did 6 Mona Lisas, and Yves Chaudron is believed to have been the forger. I mean, I expanded it, of course, because there's no documentation. So I went to kind of all the sources that told me what were possible. And then I used what I wanted. And, I'm a storyteller, so I like making things up.
But that's why the novel is so wonderful, because it's an admixture of art history, which I found just fascinating. And I hope you just write a whole succession of books like this. And the things that you've made up that are sort of phantasmagoric, so it's a wonderful combination of the two. Now, do we have any time for some questions?
Let's see.
Will you revive your Kate McKinnon series? Love them.
Oh, that's so nice. I love Kate.
I did too.
I just loved Kate. Kate was the opposite of me. She is a woman, she is tall, she's smart as could be, she's beautiful, and she was rich. Although Kate had everything, and then by the second book, I took everything away from her.
Oh, and her name is McKinnon.
Kate McKinnon. I don't know if I would write another Kate McKinnon book. I never say never to anything because you just don't know what you're going to revisit. Um, she hasn't, she's part of my life, I feel, and maybe,
The Last Mona Lisa is not a standalone novel. Probably you'll write another, at least one other.
Yeah, as I said, I'm working on another novel that has similar, well, it has some of the same characters as main characters. And
We know that Luke can't be the great grandson of anybody in the new novel. Right?
no, I mean, I came up with something that just, sometimes, Joyce, when you're writing, and something, you start typing something and you think, where did that come from? That wasn't what I was thinking. That happens to me. And I had this idea that it happened often in The Last Mona Lisa, and I followed it. But in the new book, well, yeah, next time when we can talk about that after we finish our heist book together. So,
and where is the next in the series? Where will that be set?
Part of it, well, it's going to be in the past and the present, and in the past, it's going to be in 1940s Hollywood.
Oh wow, 1927.
And there's a reason for that because there's a major character back there, and the research is so much fun that I fall into rabbit holes of this research because my character in the past, was really in real life friends with Greta Garbo and Errol Flynn and Groucho Marx. And so that plays against my present day story, which will be in New York, Amsterdam, and it will be in France. So I'm hoping, yeah.
Isn't there an Amsterdam art heist?
It was. Has been, yeah. This is sort of different, but than that, yeah.
I have another question. What are some of your favorite art heist books or movies?
Oh, well, I think my favorite art heist movie is one that most people might not agree, but it's the remake of the Thomas Crown Affair. Now, people
haven't seen that.
It's kind of sacrilege to say you don't like the original, Thomas Crown Affair, but I don't. I love Steve McQueen. I love Faye Dunaway, but I don't like that movie. I think it's kind of arch and mannered. The remake with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo is so much fun. And it starts with a heist in the Metropolitan Museum of Art that is breathtaking. And Rene Russo, when I was writing the Kate McKinnon books, I used to imagine that Rene Russo would play her on the screen because if you see her in that movie, she is so brilliant. She is so witty and beautiful and just in command in a way that is fantastic. So that's an art heist movie I love. I'm drawn to all of them though. I like all those art movies.
I don't actually know any. I've never seen the Thomas Crown Affair.
Oh, I recommend it. The remake of it. It's very fun. I also, I like all those kind of the ocean movies. I love the way Lupin, the series, opened in the Louvre on the Mona Lisa. And that's a kind of revenge caper story where he's stealing things. And I go blank when somebody asks me, but because there are so many that I've enjoyed.
Let me ask another question. What are you working on next? Is it inspired by, and I can't quite see the edge, by real events?
Yes, it is inspired by real events, but I don't really want to talk about them because I've already talked enough about it. And the reason I don't want to talk about it is not because it's secret, but because I'm afraid it will knock the ideas out of my head, and that they won't be as strong as they should be. So.
And another question, what is the toughest part of writing a thriller?
I would say the toughest part of writing a thriller is you have to be very tough on yourself. The reader expects you to answer questions, to keep moving forward. Every chapter has to like just zoom you into the next chapter. I also think that with a lot of books, particularly books that are in the thriller genre, you have to start off really well and you have to end really well. But the middle section of those books is very difficult because they tend to sag. And so I was very conscious of moving things around to keep the excitement level as intense in the middle of the book as it is when it starts and when it ends, but I think, mysteries, thrillers have a very narrow spine. You can't diverge over here. You can't give yourself liberty often to write about, like I might have wanted to go and write about Leonardo's clothes. I mentioned them, but he was a very flamboyant character. He was gay and out at a time when it was completely unheard of and dangerous. I may have wanted to write all about that, or who made his clothes, and I did all this research. But, you can't do that in a thriller because your audience is going to get restless, You can tell them these little tidbits, but you have to keep moving. It's like a locomotor is just zooming along, a train in the book.
Well, you solved that problem by shifting perspective. That we're with Luke, and then we suddenly are with somebody else who's been watching Luke, and suddenly he seems very vulnerable.
Well, that's good.
Right.
I love books that have different perspectives, and how when you're reading them and then you go from one person to another point of view, and you think, oh no, I want to stay with that person. But the thing that's important is that everybody feels that. Like, no, I wasn't ready to leave Luke, but then suddenly you're with the next thing, and that's equally exciting, or it has to be. And then you're with them, and then you're leaving them, and you have to, no, I don't want to leave them. But what is exciting about that as a process is that the reader's always waiting for them to come back and to get their information, right?
Luke is almost like an ingenue at times. There's a lot of bodies are accumulating sort of around him. He doesn't seem properly fearful. So the reader starts worrying about what's going to happen to him.
Luke steps into something he doesn't know about. And I think what's interesting, this is something I think I've learned from cinema. I'm a great movie buff like you are. And from Hitchcock, if there are two people talking at a table, it can be very boring if there's a bomb ticking under the table and they don't know it. So the reader, I always want my reader to know more than my protagonist. So the reader knows things he doesn't know. So they're like, Luke, get out of there, you crazy person. You're going to get killed, But he doesn't know. He doesn't know. I mean, he eventually realizes that this is bad, this is really bad. But
John Washington tells him that.
Yeah, John Washington warns him, and he doesn't really believe him at first.
Now, Interpol has an art crimes department.
Well, I know they did. I don't know if, they do. They have all international crime. So I think drugs, terrorism is number one. Drugs up there. Art theft. Yeah, they do have, so they have all these different departments. And so let's say there would be an art heist, which there was not long ago in Madrid. So they would work together with the police in Madrid to, they would help them on sort of background and things that they could work with. So, and they list I think it's every month, art that's been stolen so that local police can look for it and be on the lookout.
And then one of your early novels, you have an art theft detective in the New York Police Department. Is that true?
It was. New York used to have an art theft department. It doesn't anymore.
Oh, it doesn't. That's interesting.
It did, yeah. And I had met somebody who was part of it back in the time when it existed.
Well, we haven't talked much about your other books. I guess we've sort of run out of time, but you obviously did a lot of research into like homicide detectives and a protocol of police procedurals in these early novels. So maybe go back, and work along those lines.
Well, I did. I don't love procedurals. I don't love reading them, and I don't like writing them. So, if there are police in my books, I try and get out of the police station as quickly as possible because I don't think I'm good at it and I don't think it's interesting enough. So, you know, that, I mean, I know about it. I've studied it so that I don't seem like an idiot, but it's not my favorite thing to write by a long shot.
Well, John Washington Smith is sort of a rogue,
Oh, yeah.
so that he can have that expertise, but he's not necessarily going through the procedure.
He's an art analyst at Interpol, and he is not allowed to be doing what he's doing. He's totally, you know, gone AWOL and it could be in huge trouble. So, I mean, I think both he and Luke are taking tremendous risks in their life, and so is Alexandra is taking an enormous risk in her life. So, you know, everybody in this book has kind of is doing something they would never normally do for one reason or another, or for some gain, or for some thing that they're being forced to do. And that interests me, you know, when people are willing to take a crazy kind of risk, which I'm not like that. You know, I'm just not. I'm kind of, you know.
Well, you take risks with your imagination. I mean,
I do. But, you know, I don't take risks out in the world. It's not who I am, you know.
But you take on these painting commissions.
Oh yeah, they're pretty crazy.
You work very hard, like for months, replicating an artist's style, and
Yeah.
I would just find that so intimidating. I couldn't do it. But
Well,
that's risky.
It's intimidating at the beginning for me always until I start painting it, and then there's hard parts like writing a book. But you know, if I've successfully slipped into the artist's skin, and I start understanding what they were doing, I can do it. And then
Has there ever been any commission that you had more difficulty with than the others?
I probably banished them from my memory.
Did you ever paint a Rothko?
Oh, I made Rothkos. I made two Rothkos, an early Rothko and a sort of iconic Rothko. And they were fun to make. They were fun to make. I mean, I replicated his technique. I took raw pigment and rubbed it into the surface to make it glow. So, but you know, I always talk to conservators when I'm going to make a particular fake. I say, well, how did they do that? I have a friend who's a painting conservator who tells me certain things like, well, they used enamel paint or they used raw pigment. And so I try and replicate that. So have we gone over our time, Kate?
We've gone a little too far. I didn't get a
I can't
chance.
hear you, Kate.
I had a lot of other things to talk about for another.
I'm afraid of spoilers because I'm starting this tonight. It sounds amazing. And I feel like I know so much about the characters now that it's going to be just great to dive into.
Good. Good.
Cool. What a wonderful conversation.
We didn't tell too many spoilers.
Not too many, no, just enough for yeah.
And maybe you'll have myself and Joyce back when we write that heist book.
Yes, absolutely. And it'll be in the store and it'll be such a big party. We can't wait to have you guys back in person. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Just hoping.
Gives me a whole new reason to live.
It is. We really miss doing live events in the bookstore. But I want to remind everybody, littlecitybooks.com. In the chat, you can find links specifically to this book. We have book plates, so we can get you a signed copy. And we have Joyce's new book as well. And so thank you all for coming. And Jonathan and Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. What a really great evening.
Thank you to my dear friend Joyce Carolot, who is the most generous human being, our brilliant woman of letters, and so many things to so many writers. And thank you to all the people who support writers and books and bookstores. You know, where would we be without you? So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Night.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.